speaking of complexity.
The third final cut.
Sure.
So we were going to talk about complexity, and we had a topic in mind which had nothing to do with video production, but we've just spent the last, what would you say, half hour, David, with me fooling around with my video. And part of the reason is because I ran into the office and stole one of my lighting pieces earlier this week for something I shouldn't have. I should have just said no. And then when now we're getting problems where the background shimmers, I shimmer, my head shimmers, and so I'm trying not to move around too much, which is hard on me because I do like to wave my arms.
And it's a little unnatural.
Yeah. Should I risk waving my arms around and see what happens? Yeah, look,
it worked.
They were too close to the camera. They should be back here. They look the right size. When you do it up here, you know, they look like that. So, so the complexity, so the camera's not very far away from me for one, and that's part of the problem. You kind of want your backdrop further away and all of that, and I got it like right behind me. Otherwise, I can't do the fake video thing because it's not big enough to cover the whole room, and all that kind of thing. So the complexity I was talking about is what's the most complex thing in our society, and you think it's a rocket or an airplane, but it's really an automobile. And the difference between an automobile and an airplane, yes, an airplane is a higher tech, but the sophistication and engineering that goes into making an automobile is such that grandma can get in the car, or grandpa can get in the car and drive it, and drive it quite reasonably. And we let teenagers get behind the wheel. And,
which is probably a mistake.
Yeah, you worry more about them than you do about grandpa. I mean, grandpa or grandma is maybe going to cause thousands of dollars of damage, and sometimes they do tragically hurt themselves and others. But the teenagers, they tend
They're
to
the ones who are driving fast.
Yeah, and so then the damage is even higher. But even so, the technology in the cars is just amazing. And what it is that you get it down so that everything's consistent, everything's simple. We've set a precedent that you know, if you can't say E equals MC squared, you're not the smartest guy on the planet. In other words, the next guy who comes up with the thing that's going to overrule Einstein is going to have something like that he says. And then they're going to go, ooh, that's it. And then 10-year-olds are going to understand it. I mean, 10-year-olds kind of catch on to E equals MC squared, and they don't really understand all the ins and outs. And, you know, but when you look at the actual equations, if you actually open up the hood and look under the hood of E equals MC squared, you've got some really sophisticated stuff that if you can follow the math at all, it kind of hurts your brain a little bit. And then you've got these guys who are going through and they're running the math, you know, and then they're telling you, well, if you set this way and you have this situation, and they start running through the equations, you can sort of follow the equations if you're a math guy, and I am, but then all of a sudden you're sitting there and going, I'm not sure you can do that, but I'm already admittedly in over my head. So how am I supposed to tell him he's wrong? So the complexity is like that for a lot of things, and it's the same with a business. It's the same with health. It's the same with, you know, if you look at people, you know, they're beautiful when they're not wearing any clothes even. Truly, if they're healthy and taking care of themselves. Me, without my clothes on, I'm not so pretty. But the thing is, you take off that outer layer of simplicity that we have on top that we show the world. It gets ugly in a hurry. You get into those anatomy books and you start digging down in there, and you're into some really ugly stuff. And some of it gets so complex where, like, how in the world do you run through a shoulder, a blood supply, a nerve supply, the bones, the muscles, cover it with skin, You've got you've got the lymphatic system over there. It's amazing how complicated it all becomes, and that's not even as complicated as it is when you get down into the down to the molecular levels, the cellular levels, and so
it's interesting to me that you bring beauty into it, because that's very much a perception thing. I guess, skin appears more simple than, let's say, everything underneath the surface, but how much of let's say the beauty of that versus what's all underneath is, if you're seeing all that stuff underneath, some really bad stuff is happening. You just go back, not too many generations, man. If you're seeing more than the skin, or if the skin's not the right hue, I mean,
and we're not
you
talking.
Think there'd be some natural selection to anybody who doesn't have an aversion to that dying?
Right. And we're not talking hue as in pigment. We're talking hue as in, you're a different color than you normally are.
Yes.
And so
because across skin tones, there are hues which are in that, let's say, healthy range versus hues that are not. If you're familiar with people of that particular skin tone,
yes,
you recognize a differential between somebody who's got a healthy pallor, or a healthy, I guess pallor is usually unhealthy, but somebody who's got a healthy kind of a hue versus somebody who's a little under the weather.
But I was talking more about, just the complexity of everything, and then how long it, takes to learn stuff and to make it all work together. And, let's go back to the analogy of a person. You take a brand new human being. It takes 9 months before they're even ready to come out into the air. And then once they're out in the air, it takes anywhere from 2 to 5 years before they can carry on a conversation with you, do any kind of self-care at all. The learning.
But even at a year, it's shocking how intuitive some of their perception is. I mean, I think about my 1-year-old daughter.
Mm-hmm.
She's an intuitive, creature, and she does things which are really quite compelling.
Right.
I don't know. It's very interesting.
It is. And so, but again, one of the things that I'd like to tell people is that, if you're not willing to do it for 2 years, don't bother, because it takes 2 years to really have enough time to learn about many of the complexities for many of the situations and how they look. I'm still annoyed with how my video is looking. So I keep trying to find a happy place for my head to be, where I don't look like
you don't phase in and out of existence.
Phase in and out of existence, yes. It's just I'm actually
a new way to play peekaboo.
Yeah, I'm actually an automation, people. I'm not really here. I'm just programmed into the computer.
Actually, that's an interesting segue when you're talking about complexity. There have been, just in terms of video editing, enough things that came out. The Speaker of the House, there was some video that was modified such that it appeared that she'd said something, or said it in a way that wasn't actually how that all happened. And beyond that, there's my understanding is that with enough video, you can basically make some of these personalities who are on television do or say anything. And we're not even talking about they've done and said that and you clip it together, but you have enough of their voice inflections and enough video of them that with an advanced processor, you can make it look like that person has said something that they never.
Well, and even stuff you haven't clipped, because you get enough of the phonemes, they can kind of put them together differently. some of the, and if you get the right combination of them off of their video clips, yeah. And the same thing with automating it, where it blends smooth from one clip to the other. So yeah, very much so. We still have some people who can look at it and tell you whether it's fake or not, but some of them are getting to be where it's got to be the CIA doing it, otherwise you can't tell.
Adobe, actually, I just saw something, it was maybe an advertisement where, but maybe it was a news story where their AI can tell you whether an image was photoshopped, and it showed a woman smiling, and then it identified that it had been photoshopped and showed you the real image, and she was grimacing. But it was really kind of interesting.
Yeah, very much so. And so the same thing with, I've tried to figure out, businesses and stuff like that, and to start a business. And even if you think you know everything about the business until you're actually doing it, you're always got some pitfall that you're walking into. And then you find out that, well, I don't really know as much about this as I thought I did. And hopefully you're in that 80-20 rule where you do get 80% of it, and so then the 20% you don't know, you're able to overcome and take care of. And this whole business with trying to start a video channel is along those lines. I mean, we've been working for weeks on this, and we're trying to get a rhythm and a cadence and consistency about being able to make these videos so that the lighting is good. Apologize again for the video here. Where the audio is good, where the whole thing flows well, where our conversation isn't distracting because we're not, acting like sixth graders who've just first gotten up in front of the class. All of that sort of stuff.
Well, and it's interesting too, because some of these principles, you talk about 80-20. This is a book that I've been reading. It's called The Lean Startup.
Oh, we should cross-sell that and give a link to how you can get it. And of course, we're not going to get
to the one person who's watching, and you need like 1,000 people for one person to click the link. So, well, I don't think so.
Eric Ries himself may click on the link, but we'll probably have to send you to Amazon or someplace because we're not set up.
But the really cool, I can do some of that with an affiliate link. But the cool thing about this is the idea about you build, measure, learn. So with anything, and particularly he talks a lot about coding, but it's applicable to other businesses and ideas and concepts where really what you need to do, and it's sort of the idea of, have you ever seen the marshmallow challenge tower where you build it out of spaghetti and you need to put a marshmallow at the top?
No.
The idea is that you build something, then you measure how it performed, and then you iterate.
Okay.
So you learn. So then you build, measure, learn, build, measure, learn, and you just do that over and over.
Well, and
kindergartners actually do that better than almost anybody except engineers when it comes to building, let's say, a tower that bears weight.
Well, and by the way, that have you ever heard of and then you say whatever it is, like the matchbook with tacks on a wall to hold a candle. It changes every so many years because everybody's, too many people know how to do it, so they got to come up with a new one. But it's essentially take a bunch of materials that don't obviously work and make them do something that they aren't normally used for, and to do them in a way that works pretty good. I mean, if you think about it, the same thing is true of, like, again, planes, cars, all kinds of engineering, computers. The originals were pathetic.
And yeah, I mean, the first plane could barely glide, much less fly.
Right. If you don't count the planes where people killed themselves because they didn't fly. The one that actually flew, you mean with Orville or Wilbur or one of their competitors who claimed to have beat them at it.
In Brazil.
Yeah, is it Brazil? Is that the
Yeah.
one where they're thinking a guy actually did it first? But
Brazil claims first in flight, and so does North Carolina.
but you know what's important is the first guy to monetize it in our capitalistic world. We don't care that you had it first. We care that we made money at it first.
Yeah, that's a little broken, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it took a war, you know. I think if there hadn't been a war, they wouldn't have been done as well. You know that.
Wouldn't have seen advancement as much. Well, I wonder about that though, because there's some debunking of wartime technological advancements.
Really?
Because you basically end up causing so much destruction of that if you just actually applied your resources, you'd be further ahead than if you'd blown up all of your resources. Though there's some evidence that what tends to lead to prosperity is famine and war, because you have a massive population drop, and everybody who's left tends to do a little bit better. It's the whole idea behind the Thanos snap.
Yeah, except I think part of it's also the fact that unlike the Thanos thing with that movie, everybody was depressed and didn't know how to pull themselves together, whereas after a huge famine or a huge war, the survivors
who's survived has had to come
so
together.
happy. Yeah, we're all going to enjoy what we've got because look what we didn't have back then. So people really pull it together, and then you tend to have the prosperity because people are looking to make the world better. So, you know, there's that. Now, I don't know if you can hear that in the background.
Yes, there's a cat.
He actually walked into the room, so you might see, because the door is open, I didn't get it closed. And so
You're going to see a cat-like shimmer behind you.
He's over here trying to get in my lap is what he's trying to do, you silly cat, you.